What's going on, guys? It's Cimo, and welcome to another episode of The Meta Ahead, the series where we take a look at the OCG's metagame and see if there's any implications here for us TCG players to help up our game, maybe learn about some of their strategies that are ultimately going to come here to the TCG. If you didn't check out the first episode, I'd highly recommend doing so. All of our information comes from, of course, Road of the King, a great resource for anyone looking to get into learning about the OCG, and this is just going to be a breakdown of their next couple of metagame reports. I wanted to get caught up so that we are then ready for when they release a new report next time, so that way we can see how the trends will continue as we go further into the winter format. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this number one metagame breakdown. So as you can see here, not much has really changed. We have Virtual World still sitting at the top at 15%, Eldlich at 12.5%, Prank Kids have actually gone up. We're going to be talking about that towards the end of this, and then we have Chaos Thunder Dragon, Code Talker, Dragon Maid, Phantom Knight, and Zoodiac. So their meta is a little bit different than ours. Obviously, Drytron is the much more dominant force here, but the meta at the same time also does resemble ours quite a bit. A lot of Virtual World, a lot of Eldlich. They have Max C and a lot of other cards that I think kind of keep Drytron at bay, but they're going to be getting some new support in Lightning Overdrive that I think might convince them to want to go back down the combo category. So let's go ahead and scroll down here, see what kind of Eldlich variants. We've got two Zoodiac Eldlich, an Artifact Zoodiac Eldlich, a regular Eldlich, and then a Zombie Eldlich. Pretty neat. So let's scroll on down here and kick things off with Virtual World, of course, because it is the strongest and most represented deck over there. So Kinikuzo went 7-2 and finished third in the second Subo CS, which had 64 participants. Man, imagine if we had 64 person tournaments going on in person. That would be wild. But he ran the exact same build as last week, except swapping an evenly matched Ray Droll and Lockbird in the side deck. The standard build is still performing well. We talked about this more in depth in the previous episode because, again, with Virtual World being their best deck, there isn't much deviation in the strategy. The weird thing about Virtual World is that the deck's pretty clean cut. You want to pretty much run the same 30 cards in almost every single deck, and really what changes is your hand traps and your utility cards, right? Because you have Max C, Ash Blossom, Desires, but I feel like Desires is part of the staple part of this deck because you want to just have as much consistency as possible. Crossout Designator is standard there because it's basically like 3 more copies of Called by the Grave, to be honest. And then triple Tactical Talons, Harpy's Feather Duster. They also have the Trap card that we will be getting in Blazing Vortex, which is an extender. So overall, the deck is pretty much the same as we've seen before. Not too much else to say. Extra deck, same thing. All the cards we are used to seeing in this deck. And then the side deck, again, very similar to before. Playing the Gammas in the side deck, we seem to be main decking Gamma a lot more here in the TCG, just because obviously we have some other threats that we do have to be mindful of, but that really isn't too different when they could just side into it there in the OCG. Let's go ahead and move on to Eldlich. So Kyororo went 8-1 and finished first in the second Subo CS, which again had 64 participants. His main deck is focused on going first, running the minimal hand traps of 3 Max C, 3 Ash Blossom, and opting for counter traps such as Solemn Judgment and Solemn Strike. The Solemn counter traps are more impactful than hand traps, but come with a significant risk of being a liability when going second. His side deck is packed full of hand traps ready to be swapped over when he is unable to choose to go first. This is something that if you're unfamiliar with deck building, you may want to take note of, and that is building to build a deck to go first or to go second. So when you're opting to play cards like Solemn Judgment and Strike in your main deck, you're making your deck more oriented and geared towards going first, and that's very good if you do happen to win the die roll, but it can be a detriment if you are going second. Conversely, however, if you're playing more hand traps such as Max C, Ash Blossom, let's see what else he was playing. He had Lancia, he had Gamma, he had Nibiru. The problem with these cards is that when you're going first, these cards don't do anything, right? They're just pretty much sitting in your hand. They will most likely have some utility when your opponent does take their turn, but having something like Solemn Judgment or Solemn Strike can be much more impactful just because the effect is way stronger. Like, Ash Blossom is good, Max C is amazing, but Solemn Judgment negates any card in the game. Solemn Strike can negate any monster in the game, basically, and any summon, let's be honest. So there's a lot of pros and cons to both, and so when you're building a deck, whether it's to go first or to go second, keep that in mind. If you want to build a very solid first-oriented going deck, you may want to consider playing some very big blowout trap cards like these, or maybe even some floodgates. But if you're focused on going second, you want to play more hand traps to be able to find that nice balance. This build is also playing the brand new Pot of Disparity. We do not yet have this in the TCG. This will be released in Blazing Vortex and will probably be the chase card of the set, I imagine. For people who've never seen this, it's actually Pot of Prosperity. They changed the name here in the TCG. So you banish 3 or 6 cards of your choice from your extra deck face down. For the rest of the turn after this card resolves, any damage your opponent takes is halved. Also, excavate from the top of your deck deck equal to the number of cards banished. Add one excavated card to your hand, place the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. You can only activate it once per turn, and you cannot draw cards by card effects the turn you activate this card. This card is nice in a sort of hybrid deck like Zoodiac Eldlich because it allows you to find the other half of your deck. Let's say you open a bunch of Eldlich cards and a Pot of Prosperity, and you're really trying to dig for that Zoodiac monster, which this deck is playing 4 of. You also have the 3 tanky and the barrage, so it's really like 8. Then Pot of Prosperity will allow you to dig 6 cards deeper potentially to find that card, and then you've got both parts of your engine online. I expect to see this card see a lot of play because this just adds a lot of consistency, and the thing is, you can sacrifice that many cards in your extra deck. Like, okay, let's say you were going to banish 6, what could you get rid of out of your extra deck here? You could probably get rid of a Borbo, a Chakanine, a Tiger Mortar, and then depending on the situation, probably get rid of the Gustav Max because that's just like a win more card if you're already in a winning position. And then, you know, then you're getting a little bit tight for space, right? Because you don't really want to give up your other Zeus. I mean, you've got maybe the Utopia Future Dragon package here. You've got the Alsa package. So it really just depends on if you know what your opponent's playing. You're going to have to judge the situation as necessary. Or maybe you're going to dig for a specific card that isn't one of the opposite pieces of your engine. Maybe you want a specific in-engine piece, and this card can just really help you dig deeper, especially when it comes to your side deck. Keep that in mind for this card. 6 cards deeper when you're side decked, you know, anywhere from 6 to 8 cards when you're going into games 2 and 3, that is huge. Moving on along to the star of the show here, which is Prank Kids. Now, Mudu went 7-0 and finished first in the 170th Ordetachi Trading Card Club CS, which had 46 participants. He ran 3 There Can Be Only One in the main deck. There Can Be Only One is effective against a variety of top decks as they are predominantly made up of a single monster type. Eldlich would be unable to special summon Conquistador of the Golden Land, Walkero of the Golden Land, while Eldlich the Golden Lord is on the field as they are all zombies. Zoodiac would be unable to summon Xyz monsters as they are all Beast Warrior. Virtual World are Psychic or Worm. Thunder Dragon are Thunder. Kotalker and Solomon Great are Cybers. Prank Kids themselves are slightly affected as each Prank Kids effect monster has a corresponding fusion monster or link monster with the same type. However, with proper sequencing, they can adjust their combos and maneuver around the overlapping monster types. This is a really innovative way for There Can Be Only One to be used. So for anyone who's never seen this card, it's a continuous trap. Each player can only control one monster of each type, and if a player controls 2 or more monsters of the same type, they must send some to the graveyard so they control no more than one monster of that type. So it's like the reverse of Rivalry of Warlord. So instead of only being able to control one type, you have to control all different types. And so in a deck like Prank Kids, where all the Prank Kids are just a variety of different types, and again, like they said, when you get down to the fusions and the links, there is some overlapping there. There are ways that you can try to play around your own copy of There Can Be Only One, so then that way you are able to keep your opponent under that lock. This deck's also playing 3 copies of Twin Twister, which interests me because I'm not sure if this is solely in here to break the There Can Be Only One lock, so that way if the opportunity presents itself, you could potentially just link up into something like Access Code Talker and kill the opponent, because Twin Twister in a format with Eldlich doesn't necessarily seem the best, because if you hit any of their back row, they're just going to trigger and come back. I guess to be fair, if they're under There Can Be Only One, they can't really do anything about it, but they're going to get the advantage regardless, so I'm not exactly too sure. Twin Kid's just general like utility, so I guess it's fine, but overall pretty interesting. We also see the Ghost Spells in the main deck here as well. Ghost Spell and Skullmeister are definitely on that hype train. That's going to do it for the number 1 report. Now I want to take us swiftly into the report number 2. This was the following week, and this will actually catch us up with the reports for the future. Definitely a little bit more diverse this week. We have 10.5% Virtual World and Eldlich, Zoodiac at 9.2, and look what's coming up the rear here. We have Adamancipator, Drytron, Endymion, Phantom Knight, Dragon Maid, Shaddoll, Salmon Great, Thunder Dragon, and a bunch of other decks. But Adamancipator and Drytron coming back up is very fascinating. Drytron's not too much of a surprise, but Adamancipator, that's a pretty big one. So let's go ahead and see what this report has to say. Looking at the Eldlich variants, it was 6 Zoodiac Eldlich and 2 Pure Eldlich. Shino finished second in 4th Adachi CS, which had 31 teams or 93 participants. Interesting. So it looks like they did a team event for this specific local here. He ran 1 Virtual World Otohime Tutu in the main deck, giving him options to continue developing his opening board when being disrupted by an artifact Lancia. So Tutu is a card we haven't seen much of here in the TCG because guess what? It's not out yet, but here it is for anyone who has never seen it. It is an Earthworm effect, level 6, 1200 attack, 1800 defense. If you control no monsters or all monsters you control are Psychic and or Worm monsters, you can normal summon this card without tributing. If this card is in your graveyard, you can discard a Psychic or Worm monster, special summon this card as a tuner, but banish it when opponent leaves the field. Also, for the rest of this turn, you can only special summon level, rank, or 3 or higher monsters, and you can only use this effect once per turn. So it has your traditional virtual world clause, but it's neat because you can send this to the graveyard off of something such as the Searcher spell, or off of, there's a variety of cards that can get this into the graveyard, so then you can use this as a level 6 extender, possibly a tuner as well, to be able to play around some of your opponent's interruption. Let's continue on. He also ran one Beatrice, Lady of the Eternal, and one Mischief of the Gnomes in the side deck. I already like where this is going. Against the Virtual World Mirror Match or Phantom Knights, Beatrice, Lady of the Eternal could be used to send Mischief of the Gnomes from the deck to the graveyard. Then during the opponent's turn, activating Mischief of the Gnomes' second effect would reduce the levels of all monster in each player's hand by 1, even after they are summoned or set, causing the opponent to be unable to make their standard synchro summon and Xyz summon. That is so cool. That is such a great throwback to, oh man, what was it? Like Burning Abyss days, I believe, was the last time this card saw play. I'm sure someone can correct me down in the comments. For any of you who've never seen Mischief of the Gnomes before, I actually might have done a video about this like when I first started YouTube, but this card is awesome. So it's a normal trap. This turn, reduce the levels of all monsters in each player's hand by 1, even after they are summoned or set. You can banish this card from the graveyard this turn, reduce the levels of all monsters in each player's hand by 1, even after they are summoned or set. So it's the same effect both times, but you can use it twice if you actually are able to set it. Otherwise, you can just dump it again off of like Beatrice, like they talked about in this deck. This is really neat. So effectively, if you are hit by Lancia, if you're able to get 2/2 to the graveyard, you can actually bring it back, and then you can use it with something like the other level 6, and then make that Beatrice, and basically stop your opponent from playing the game altogether. There's only one Mischief of the Gnomes in the side deck here, but honestly, you only need one. If you draw it, fantastic, you don't have to worry about it, but if you don't, you can just make the Beatrice, which we're seeing right here in the extra deck. You have that for setup against your Virtual World matchup, and being able to mess with the levels like that is a way to really hose a deck like Virtual World. This is a really heads-up way to take care of that, and who knows, this might be something that some other players might catch on to, and something that they actually try to use to combat their Virtual World matchup. Other than that, the deck is, again, fairly standard. If you look at it even compared to this one right here, we can go back and just see, this one was a 42 card deck, this one is 40, but the cards are almost nearly identical. This one's playing one of Pot of Prosperity, but for the most part, you're going to be seeing a lot of similarities here. Extra deck is even almost identical as well, except for the Beatrice for the nice little tech, and then the side deck, we've got some Skullmeisters. That's probably the only like notable change compared to the other one. Also Imperm in here as well. Let's move on to Eldlich. On Sunday, Bao went 5-2 and finished 3rd through 4th in the 49th Gorosu CS, which had 38 teams or 114 participants. On Monday, he went 5-2 and finished 3rd and 4th in the 50th Gorosu CS, which had 30 teams or 60 participants, giving him an overall record of 10-4. For both days, he ran the exact same deck build. He chose to run standard Eldlich in his main deck, but left the Zoodiac package in the side deck so he could swap over to a Zoodiac Eldlich build after side decking. The 2 Eldlich in the top cut are contributed by him, so all 8 Eldlich builds this week are a form of Zoodiac Eldlich. So this is fascinating. So it's Zoodiac Eldlich, but opting to side into the Zoodiac cards after game 1. That's really fascinating. Now, this is a very big difference compared to us TCG players, is that the OCG actually has 3 skill drains. Skill drain is just a house. Anyone who's ever played against skill drain knows this. And against Eldlich, Eldlich doesn't care. Eldlich does not give a shit about skill drain in the slightest. And so having this to be able to stop a lot of decks, and then in games 2 and 3, you can adapt your strategy to a Zoodiac Eldlich deck, I think that's actually really cool. You hear the term smoke screening when it comes to side decks, and you really don't see that happen too often anymore, but this might be the closest to smoke screening we've seen in quite some time. Let's take a look at his deck here. So down in the side deck, he has a copy of Whiptail and Thoroughblade, 1 Tanky, 1 Barrage. So he's got a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 Zoodiac cards that he brings in. So, I mean, is that really Zoodiac Eldlich if you're just playing like 4 Zoodiac cards? I don't know. I guess you are playing the Zoodiacs, and then it just basically turns on the entirety of your extra deck, because otherwise you're not playing it. Also playing Vampire Sucker in the extra deck. That's something we don't really see too often, but very, very interesting overall. What I like about this is that if Eldlich with the skill drains is actually more suited towards a particular matchup, then you can play the pure Eldlich deck. But if Zoodiac Eldlich actually gives you a lot more reach, because then you have access to stuff like Zeus, maybe for like the mirror match as an example, maybe he wanted to just play the pure Eldlich against some of the other decks, but then when you're playing the mirror, Zeus can just completely blow out these types of decks a lot of the time. Maybe that was the reasoning, I can't say for sure. sure, but I really like the theory behind this, and this is why I like doing this series. It's really cool to see what the OCG comes up with. Let's go ahead and move on to pure Zoodiac, it looks like, is up next. Akua went 5-2 and finished second. Zoodiac is a deck with a lot of flex spot in the main deck to run tech cards of your choice. Interestingly, the 7 Zoodiac deck builds this week chose to run very similar tech choices in the main deck. All 7 builds ran 3 Book of Moon and 3 Cosmic Cyclone in the main deck. 4 builds ran the full set of 3 Solemn Strike, and 2 builds ran 2 Solemn Strike, while the last build chose to run none. This might be the common understanding among Zoodiac players that this is the best configuration against the current metagame. So as we go down here, this is something we've always known about Zoodiac, right? When it comes to Zoodiac, aside from your core engine, like if you take out the 3 Maxis, the 3 Ash Blossoms, the 2 Hand Traps here, I guess the Pankratops by extension as well, and then you take out, like, let's say your 3 Book of Moon, your 3 Cosmic Cyclone, and then your 3 Solemn Strike, and some of these other ones are debatable, you've got about 15 to 20 slots to mess with to fine-tune your deck against a specific metagame. And this is one of the reasons why Zoodiac has always been such a powerful deck, is because if you want to play more hand traps, you can play like a 20 hand trap version of Zoodiac. If you want to play more trap cards, you can do that. There's a lot of wiggle room to be able to use Zoodiac in different ways. That's why hybrid decks taking advantage of Zoodiac cards are so popular as well, and have been since Zoodiac's inception, and so you're really getting to see this on display. Aside from that, though, this is your pretty standard cookie cutter Zoodiac list. I mean, Book of Moon is just such a powerhouse. I'm so happy to see that this card is back at 3. It has been for a while, but to see this much play for a card being this old is fantastic. Being able to disrupt Link plays, Xyz plays, Synchro plays, this card has just been an all-star within the past year or so, and I'm really happy to see it. Also, Cosmic Cyclone's pretty heads up for all the Eldlich running around in this format. Also has a lot of utility against the Zoodiac mirror as well, because you can Cosmic Cyclone Tenki, you can get rid of something like Barrage. Just hitting a back row like a Solemn Strike can actually allow you to then ensure that your plays are going to go off, and it's just a 1-for-1 removal. You're not playing like Twin Twister or anything, and banishing is important, like I said, for Eldlich, so you even have utility against that matchup. Also, against Virtual World, you have something like the trap card Chuche, which allows you to just get your monsters immediately popped, so having Cyclone for something like this is pretty nice. Extra deck is pretty straightforward. Again, you have the Utopic Future Dragon over there, which makes Zoodiac way better because that card is insane. And then for the side deck, it's pretty much everything we've seen the most of already. We've got Nibiru, Lancia, we've got Mind Controls, which Mind Control is something we have, I believe, limited here in the TCG. This card is crazy strong. I cannot believe that this card is still at more than 1 over there. We got Twins, we got Lightning Storms, we got stuff to take care of the back row if we need to, but overall, pretty solid looking deck. You know, I really just love taking the time to look over at the OCG to see what they are up to, because who knows, maybe from this video you may have learned a trick or two to be able to help combat the current TCG metagame, since our formats are so similar. Now, that may not always be the case, but it's always good to take a look ahead at what's to come, because then that way you're going to be the best prepared to help take it on. So guys, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Meta Ahead. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video helpful, consider supporting me on Patreon for exclusive early one-day access to the Yu-Gi-Oh progression series and the history of Yu-Gi-Oh. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and we will see you next time.